talking today about using the end to prepare for the beginning. And as we symbolically end 2012, not actually ending, although it's just an idea, right? And we begin 2013. The question is, how do we make this transition in a way that works for us, individually and hopefully collectively? You know, if you look out at the landscape of the world today, it's quite an interesting place. Of course, it always is. Today we have the advantage, if it is an advantage, of knowing more about the rest of the world potentially than we ever have before. There's so much information and so many channels through which to receive it. You can see photographs of pretty much anything on Earth via the internet and the media and other things. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you know, if you wanted to see anything exotic, you had to find a book somewhere that had pictures and things like that. Now you can go online and within an hour you can see 3,000 or 4,000 different images of things that would have been unavailable not that long ago and now are becoming relatively commonplace. Of course, we also get to see some of the underbelly of the way the world works. And we have some concerns about, you know, are we going to get through as a collective race, as in our nation and in the world? Are we going to deal with some of the challenges that face us that are unprecedented? You know, the world has never had to deal with such collectively complex issues before. And one thing that we know is that the institutions that got us here don't know how to get us out. And what's called for is something new to emerge in some form or fashion. And that's probably true for our own individual lives as well. What is always called forth, whenever, I think, you know, the way spirit works, the way the universe works and our individual reality works, is that whenever you find yourself in a challenging situation, something greater is being called forth from you. And that's, if that situation has a purpose, that's it. How can I go within and find some reservoir of strength or reservoir of love or reservoir of compassion or wisdom that heretofore I haven't had to express in my life, but that is being called forward. So that's one of the themes of today. And the other theme is the idea of releasing in order to make room for something new. Because so often we kind of cling to our way of being, our worldview. We cling to what has worked in the past, or what we think has worked. I'm reading a really interesting book called Evolutionaries by Carter Phipps, and one of the things he talks about is as things begin to change in individuals' lives and in our collective lives, and what used to work doesn't work so well anymore, we tend to do the same thing we used to do, only louder. Because, well, this used to work, and it ought to work now. And then quite often we find, no, it doesn't anymore, that you have to find a new way of being. And this happens to us individually all the time, and it's happening more and more in the world around us. You know, an example would be over the last 50 years, how many Americans have had to relearn how to do jobs because the jobs they had either went away or became irrelevant. And we can say, well, gee, that shouldn't have happened, but that's what happens. Things change. And if we don't see value in our ability to adapt and grow, we're unable to maintain the kind of standard of living we want as change occurs. The dynamics of change within your own household. If you think back, you know, some of us have been around a few decades, and if you think back to what your childhood was like and what your childhood home was like and having meals and things like that, it's probably very different today. You know, I know when Grace is home now from college, our daughter Grace, she's at Boston University, and she's home for a month, and it's just like she never left. The car's missing, and we kind of follow her on Twitter to see what's going on. She's at Disneyland today. And it's not, hey, Mom, can I go to Disney? Mom, I'm going to Disneyland Sunday. I need the car. You know, and that was sent via text message. And, like it or not, that's the world we live in now. And if you're unwilling to adapt to that, you struggle and you become bitter and you become frustrated because the world won't go back to the way it was. We can never go back. That's just part of the deal. So one of the things Carter Phipps says in this book is what the new, and this traces the evolution of evolutionary thought, which is very different today than it was in Darwin's time. He says the biggest thing is to recognize that nothing is static, nothing is solid, nothing is still. That everything is in a flow, and it's only flowing in one direction, toward the future. Nothing flows backward. So if we're going to live in the world that's coming, we have to be ready for it. We have to be adaptable to the inevitable kinds of changes, and that will be different for all of us because we all are different beings and we all relate to the world in different ways. So, Dr. Holmes said, expectancy speeds progress. Therefore, live in a continual state of expectancy. Now, expectancy means I'm looking forward. It doesn't mean I'm longing for the way it used to be. Because if I'm longing for the way it used to be, I'm facing in the wrong direction, and it'd be like driving your car sitting in the back seat looking out the back window. It's kind of hard to navigate without, you'd probably go off the road. But you can also have the expectancy that everything's going to hell. You can live from the expectancy that things are getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And the thing is that whatever you accept as your expectancy, that's how you see the world unfold. That we each decide our own worldview, and then we tend to see the world in a way that conforms to that worldview. So we look ahead to a year like 2013, which I think is going to be really interesting. In the Chinese sense, they would say to their enemies, may you live an interesting life. Interesting in the sense that it's going to be chaotic in a lot of ways, because one of the things that we begin to recognize now is that creativity is spawned through chaos more than through stasis or through everything being calm and predictable. But when you have the expectancy that the chaos is leading to something greater, you have a different experience of the chaos than when you just look at the chaos and say, oh my God, it's all going to hell. My good friend Richard Clark and his wife Mary gave us some bacon for Christmas. This wonderful artisanal bacon from Vermont, right? Yeah. And we hadn't had bacon in the house in quite a while, so it was rather exciting. So the next morning I got up and got the big old cast iron frying pan out and put some strips of bacon in, and it's very thick and it was just gorgeous. And then after the bacon was finished, I drained the grease and put some eggs in. Now, you may know that eggs come in a shell. And in order to make my delicious breakfast, I had to crack open the shell of the egg and dump the contents into the hot pan. Now, I would imagine, to whatever degree that egg has consciousness, it was not pleased with that circumstance. Joseph Campbell said, in order to make an omelet, you've got to break some eggs. And that's a basic truism of life. It's no more true now than it used to be. It's just that now the difference is the rate of change is accelerating. The rate of human knowledge is accelerating. We were at the dinner last night with some friends, and one of them who's sort of involved, very knowledgeable at the publishing industry, said there were 498,000 books published in the United States last year. Now, I haven't read all of those. But just imagine, and that's just what was published. What about all the crap people put out on the internet, and all the other stuff, good and bad, and add the rest of the world into it. We're awash in information. And the good part of that is a lot's available. Maybe the dangerous part of that is you read a very narrow slice that already conforms to what you already think is true. And you miss the rest of the pie. And you say, based on everything I've read, this is what is true. And that's true. Based on everything you've read, this is what is true. But guess what? None of us has read everything. None of us has the total picture. So to move forward in a world, what kind of expectancy do we set for ourselves moving forward in a world with so much information available that no one can have access to all of it? That the idea of an expert is a dead idea. Because there's simply too much to know. Now, you can look at that and say, oh, that's it. That's the end. There's too much to know. Nobody can know anything. We're probably going to screw it up, and everything will be, we'll all be cinders. Or you can say, what an exciting opportunity to pick and choose what I choose to know, but to recognize within it that I don't know everything. And what does it mean if I can't know everything and you can't know everything? We need to become more interdependent, don't we? And when we encounter someone who has a different worldview of ours because they've read a slightly different line in that pie, rather than calling them crazy or kooks or the enemy, we need to think, no, maybe there's something to what they're saying. Maybe there's a perspective there that I'm just not, I haven't had access to up to this point. Expectancy speeds progress. So no matter what the outer circumstances are, what we need to understand is, and this is an eternal truth, this isn't new, that you're creating your path through the world that you inhabit, not the other way around. The world that you inhabit isn't creating your path for you. And if the waves get bumpy, if the road gets bumpy, you say, okay, I'm switching to four-wheel drive. Rather than saying, oh, I can't make it. It'd be like somebody being stuck in the sand because they don't want to turn on the four-wheel drive switch. Well, I've never turned it on before. I'm kind of concerned what would happen. So I'm going to sit here in two-wheel drive and the wheels are spinning. And you say, boy, that's silly. You have this other capacity right in the vehicle and you're not using it. So how can I tell when I'm in a situation where I have this other capacity within me that I'm not using? The answer is I'm suffering in some way. If I'm suffering in some way, it means I have an inner capacity that I'm not using, that is being called forth by the very circumstances of my suffering. But maybe I've come to believe that I've reached my limits. I've done all I can do, or something like that. So I don't then go in and look for that other capacity. Just try to make the best of a bad situation. All right? Have you ever done that? So a new year means a fresh start, at least the potential for one. But guess what? Every day has within it the potential for a fresh start. You don't have to wait until Tuesday to transform your life. You could do it right now. You could be doing it right now. At one point in the New Testament, Jesus says, "Behold, I make all things new." That the potential within each of us is that we are always capable of stepping into a different way of being if our expectancy and understanding says this is what I need to do or choose to do in order to maximize my experience of life in whatever world I happen to find myself. If you were kidnapped today and taken to a foreign country, let's say, where the language was strange, and you were plopped out and you were managed to get away from your kidnappers, or they released you, but you had to stay in that country, you would have a choice. You could maybe learn the language. You could say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not here voluntarily. I'm not going to learn a new language. And that would have a lot to do with your experience in that new place. And the interesting thing is, if we make bad choices that limit us, we always manage to justify them, don't we? And sometimes it's because we've accepted a belief that is limiting, that maybe came from somewhere else. I was reading today, there's an article in the paper. In Maryland, you may know, was one of the states that voted to legalize gay marriage. And the capital of Maryland is Annapolis. And if you've ever been there, you know it's a really beautiful little town right on the Chesapeake Bay, and it's very historic. And a lot of people go there to get married. They have a big wedding industry there. And there's this little cable car service, like an antique-looking cable. They're not antiques, but they look like old cable cars that do tours around town, but they also do a lot of wedding business. So the story was about the owner of the cable car business who says, my Christian beliefs do not allow me to support people of the same gender getting married, so I'm canceling all of my wedding business because I know if I only say I won't work a same-sex marriage, I'd be discriminating. So he sent messages to all of his clients who had signed up for 2013 to be married that because of my religious belief here, I'm not going to be available to work your wedding. And it was kind of an interesting response. One of the couples, one of the men in the couple, who was it was a heterosexual couple, you know, mixed marriage, a man and a woman. Because in the letter, the owner of the company said the churches don't have to perform gay marriages because of their religious affiliation and so forth. And the guy responds, yeah, but you're shuttling people around in a trolley. That's not exactly God's work. But see, what led that person to that belief, to that action, was a belief, a dogmatic belief that something was wrong. And quite frankly, you know, my position would be, yeah, that's a dogmatic belief that the world is leaving behind, pretty clearly. And if you choose to stay in that dogmatic belief, you're going to suffer as the world changes because you're not able to function fully in a more free society. And there's probably little mini examples of that, not about legal things, but many examples of that in all of our lives. I just think that's wrong, you know. So no one should do anything that disturbs me. I think that would be a good rule. I could live with that, as long as it's me that doesn't have to be disturbed. But see, there's nothing in the Constitution about your freedom from being disturbed. The Founding Fathers were pretty clever about that because I think they realized that that would be impossible. Because if you have a country with more than one person, somebody's going to get disturbed on a fairly regular basis, probably. Right? When I was a police officer, so many of the calls that I went on were people who didn't want to be disturbed, and what they were reporting was something that wasn't illegal. You know, somebody making too much noise. Well, it's noon, you know. And you know, call me at midnight if it's still happening, you know. That kind of thing. Well, I shouldn't have to, and people, I shouldn't have to be disturbed. You know, and I say, well, I'm looking in my procedure manual, but I don't see that in there anywhere. Matter of fact, you're disturbing me right now. What about my freedom? But you know, we're funny that way. You know, we're funny that way. So a fresh start in today's world, I think, means opening up to greater possibilities in a more complex world. Because that's just the cards we've been dealt. You know, if we were born 500 or 600 years ago, we wouldn't have this problem. Because the world changed much more slowly. You would already, you know, if you were a male 500 years ago, you would be doing whatever your dad did. Matter of fact, it would probably be your last name. Farmer or blacksmith or whatever. Troublemaker, you know. And if you were a woman, you'd be being married off to somebody who would help make economic sense for both families. So you wouldn't have to worry about all this stuff changing, and all the technology would be pretty much the same. The horse is going to pull the plow for your generation just like it did for the generations before. So things didn't really start speeding up until the 1700s and 1800s when some fool invented the engine. And the Industrial Revolution began at the same time. The Enlightenment was happening, moving away from superstition toward reason. And those two engines have driven all the change since. And they get faster and faster and faster and faster. And here we are. So while we have a lot of freedoms, we don't have a freedom to choose how the world is, but we do have absolute freedom to choose how we relate to it. But if you choose to relate to the world as though it were 50 years ago, you're going to suffer because it isn't that way. So our whole teaching, Dr. Holmes was a very forward-looking person. He recognized that it wasn't the externalities that are driving everything, it was the internal consciousness. And a consciousness of success, a consciousness of love, a consciousness of compassion would thrive in any circumstances. There's a wonderful saying in metaphysics, I am not moved by appearances, therefore appearances move. But I can't move nature against its nature. Another great saying, it's easier to ride a horse in the direction it's going. And evolution, which is the dynamic of the universe, is moving to the future in all cases. Dr. Holmes says, wake up! Your word is all powerful. Your consciousness is one with omnipotence. Your thought is infinite. Your destiny is eternal, and your home is everlasting heaven. That's not so different from what Jesus is reported to have said. It's not so different from what Muhammad said. It's not so different from what the Buddha said. All the wise ones have said the same thing. Maybe it's true. So I think, here's my recommendation. Spend the month of January seeing if it's true for you. If it's not, we'll give you your money back. But what if all of this were true? Your word is all powerful. Your word to yourself. The word you tell yourself about what is real and true for you. Because that's whatever you accept from that word is how you see or what you see from. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. Your thought is infinite, your destiny is eternal, and your home is everlasting heaven. Heaven is a state of mind. So we face a new beginning. We face this kind of artificial one of the new year, but we face a new beginning in every moment. And we are limited by our history to the degree that we have not consciously moved into a different idea. We were having a conversation at dinner last night, and one of the folks we were eating with said her belief is she's become to believe more in destiny, that everything is predestined, that we don't really have free will. And I wasn't in a mood to argue. No, I just didn't want to. So what I thought was, well, I'm sitting here having dinner with you. I don't think that was predestined in the pre-dawn times of before the Big Bang. We had other choices. You know. There's too much evidence that it's not destiny. That the universe is unfolding moment by moment. And that if everything was destiny, very little would change. When you think about it. But we know that evolution, where new species show up and things like that, just biological evolution, happens when something totally random, seemingly, comes out of a long lineage of certain kinds of procreation, and then this odd-looking creature shows up that's different than the others to a significant degree, and something mates with it. That has to happen too. And you get a new species. Takes a little longer than that, but that's kind of generally how it works. There's something called a mutation that can't be predicted by the history. And you end up with something greater than what came before. Like when there was no life and then there was life. No humans and then there's humans. You know, this process is not stopped. We're just kind of in the middle of it. Something's coming next. It may already be here, but we just haven't discovered it yet. What's the next? We're Homo sapiens sapien. What's next? Barbara Marx Hubbard calls it Homo universalis is next, which she describes as the universal human that knows who it is. That we are already, and the general consensus among the evolutionary thinkers is we are already consciously directing evolution. We're the first species to ever have the capacity to do that. So we're all evolving. You're evolving, I'm evolving, and the question is, what are you evolving into? Some of us are devolving by the way that we think. But we all have that capacity to move into a new beginning. Nietzsche, who was not always a cheerful guy, but he had some pretty powerful things to say. What does not kill me makes me stronger. Now, this is a very concise statement of truth. But I would add, what does not kill me has the potential to make me stronger, because I have to do something about it. You know, if you have what we would call a tragic experience in your life, and we all have them, how we think about that determines whether or not we grow from that, how we come to understand it. So part of it is having an awareness that that's the nature of things. Part of it is having an awareness that the realization that it's not dictated in the event what it should lead to, but that we have the capacity to decide what it means. When my daughter Caitlin was killed in that car accident, my process of that determined whether or not I grew from that or shrunk from it. That was totally up to me. There isn't a roadmap that says this is the path everyone follows. We all grieve differently. And maybe for you it's been a serious illness, or it's been a financial setback, or it's been someone betraying you in a relationship. We've all got our litany of them. But it's what we did with that as to whether or not it made us stronger. The truth is the potential is always there to be stronger out of it. Another way that doesn't even sounds nonsensical is to say, what is the gift in this tragedy? The gift is that potential, and it's either opened or it isn't. So some of us have left a lot of gifts unopened. We've decided to become the victim of the tragedy and live from that worldview. And the trouble with being a victim of a tragedy is you begin to see the whole world as though you were its victim. And we have a lot of that in our country today. A lot of the fear, a lot of the concern about moving forward is because people feel victimized by what's happened in their lives. And we've elevated the victim to television star, haven't we? How much of television is turning on watching people justify their victimhood? Oprah started it. She saw the light part of the way through, but she still throws in a lot of victims. But now they have to be redeemed. But if you think about it, you know, there are people, I know people that were jealous that they couldn't get on TV and talk about their problems. My problems aren't big enough. God, I wish I had a bigger tragedy in my life. Maybe I could get on Jerry Springer, which itself is a tragedy. It's a comedy about tragedy. Kind of interesting. Nietzsche also said, one must have chaos within oneself in order to give birth to a dancing star. One must have chaos within oneself. Chaos is what? It's breaking the shell of the egg. Before the shell is broken, everything's fine, homeostasis. The shell is broken, chaos. After it, we go back to homeostasis in a different form. Now you got a fried egg, which provides nourishment. But it's getting from the shell, in the shell, to the frying pan that's kind of scary. That's the crucifixion. Jesus went in the story, the myth has to do with the story of something has to die so something greater can be born. And the process of dying and being reborn is chaotic to one degree or another, from discomfort to heart-wrenching pain. Somewhere on that continuum. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning anything. We're at our best when we have a problem. There was a guy I used to work with in the police department. He was kind of known as a difficult person to work with. And when he made sergeant, his methodology was to make sure everybody that worked for him always had a problem. He said, if they don't have a problem, I'll be their problem. And people thought he was being cruel, but really what he recognized was that people responded and grew when they were challenged. So he would make sure his people were being challenged. I think he overdid it, personally, because he didn't accompany it with the reassurance that they had the capacity to meet the challenge. You see, you have to have both. But he had a part of a right idea. If we try to make everyone comfortable, nothing changes. And it's dangerous not to change in a changing world. You get left behind. Because the world isn't interested in whether or not you're comfortable. The universe isn't interested in that. The universe is interested in manifesting itself at greater and greater levels. So we get to the new year and we want to talk about an intention. What is the intention for the new year? I hope you have a dozen. One big one about how you choose to be in the new year. A greater, more powerful, more loving and compassionate, more fully realized version of yourself would be a good start. And then have a bunch of ancillary intentions about the different areas of your life. Financial intentions, relationship intentions, recreation intentions. Where are you going to go and how are you going to have fun this year? Intentions for your health and physical well-being. You know, I'm not talking about a New Year's resolution. They don't work. Usually by the third week in January, you've forgotten what the hell they were. Conveniently. You only forget what you don't want to do. Right? Anybody ever forgotten to go on vacation? Anybody ever forgotten it was Christmas Day or something like, you know what I mean? No, you forget, I was supposed to call my mother-in-law, I forgot. I was supposed to go to the dentist, I forgot. That's your subconscious's way of getting you out of what you've decided you don't want to do. An intention has to be something you want to do. Because the change you make, if it's not volitional, if it's not your idea and your desire, your internal mechanism will simply fight against it. If you make it a have to, you're wasting your time. Because when I say I have to lose weight, my subconscious says, don't worry, I'll get you out of it. And you'll do something like invite people for dinner every night of the week. How can I go on a diet? All the people are coming over, you know. Funny how that works. Really, that's what happens when you try to motivate yourself by I have to change. Sit down until that feeling passes. It's got to be I want to, I choose to, I like it, I love it, or it ain't going to happen. So maybe what we need to do sometimes is figure out why I want to, choose to, like it, love it. And if we can't, maybe that's not the change for us. Because it won't work anyway. So part of the work process of doing intention is to get into that flow so you're moving forward out of your own desire and your own sense of wanting something better for yourself and for those that you care about. This is long, but it's worth it. John O'Donohue is a wonderful mythologist, poet. When love awakens in your life, in the night of your heart, it is like the dawn breaking within you. Where before there was an anonymity, now there is intimacy. Where before there was fear, now there is courage. Where before in your life there was awkwardness, now there is a rhythm of grace and gracefulness. Where before you used to be jagged, now you are elegant and in rhythm with yourself. When love awakens in your life, it is like a rebirth, a new beginning. So every change that you're contemplating in your life, at the core of it is love. Love for yourself, love for your life, love for the world. And if I can recognize that I am love, and therefore what I manifest is love, I can get into that flow much more easily. I don't have to fight anything. Your changes shouldn't be a fight. They should be a moving forward with a firm conviction and a firm sense of loving yourself and gently moving through it, but not stopping. Tom Costa, one of our great teachers, used to say, "All is well, even in my hell." All is well, even in my hell. And lo, when I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall not stop and build a condominium. So the mechanism, the tool for all this is your imagination. It's your capacity to use your mind to think and picture and feel the desired end result. So that's how we enter the new year. We enter the new year thinking, man, as I create the perfect year unfolding, my best year ever, what does that look like and feel like? Where am I? What am I doing? Who am I with? How am I feeling? And I make it at the highest possible level. And I've got to get that emotional sense. So I cultivate the imagination of what can be. What can be. So we're going to close with a version of a wonderful song that you all know. Imagine by John Lennon. I'm going to invite everyone to stand up, and we're going to sing this together. The singers are mixed through you, so now I'm going to give you a little advice. My mom, who passed away some years ago, was a good Catholic, and she sang at the top of her lungs in church every week, and she had a terrible voice. And her attitude was, God gave me this voice, He's going to hear it. So let's do this together. There's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Can you see? Above us only sky. Imagine all the people countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. So I imagine for you a life unfolding with joy, with grace in the new year as we collectively become a more vibrant spiritual community and you individually become all that you already are. Namaste.